I'm Rachel from 7 and All, and today I'm going to be talking about how to successfully integrate a foreign language into your homeschool. The whole question we're going into today is to how to get past Hola, soy Rachel de Siete en Toro. How do you get past that? Because we all know people all around the world. We know both people, one, who can switch from one language to the other with ease, speaking fluently in both. But we also know lots of people, too, who say, oh yeah, I took Spanish or German or French for 3 or 4 years in high school or college, and they can barely remember how to ask, where's the bathroom? Or anything like that. What is the difference, and how can we make sure that we're doing things the right way in our own homeschool so that our children aren't facing the same fate of spending a whole lot of time studying a language without having much effective ability to use the language at all. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. For just a little bit of my background, I wouldn't consider myself totally fluent in any language besides English, but I do have a very solid ability to communicate in Mandarin. That's the language I'm most comfortable speaking as a second language. I can pretty easily have any conversation I need to have in Mandarin. And 2, for Spanish, I'm getting better at my ability to speak, mostly because I've been motivated by having my own kids. I'm very good at reading in Spanish and comprehending in Spanish. Speaking has come a little bit slower for me on that one. But I love languages, I love language learning, and I'm excited to talk to you about this today. As a homeschool mom who's raising bilingual kids, this is something I'm passionate about. But even if your goal is not raising bilingual kids, it's simply trying not to waste your time while you're homeschooling and you want to incorporate a foreign language but you don't want to do it badly, this is going to be a great video for you because I've got some very practical advice from my own experience in studying and learning languages and from what I've observed. My tip number 1 is to choose the language that you study with care. Don't simply just choose any language. There needs to be a good reason why to choose that language and why your child would need to use that language for you to choose this, the foreign language that you're going to study if they're going to be really successful and become fluent or at least able to communicate in that language. Now, this goes back to the reason you have to think about how does anybody learn to speak any language? It comes down to relationship and the need to communicate. So you might have interest in a language, but that might not actually be enough to get you to a level where you can communicate. I know people who are really big fans of watching Korean dramas. They love Korean dramas, they like K-pop, so they decide to learn Korean. And that's not necessarily a bad reason, but the problem is if you enjoy Korean culture and media, there's not actually any communication element that's being forced upon you. You can watch a Korean drama for hours and hours, but you don't have to talk back to it. So there's no need for communication with the Korean drama. So I'm not saying that you can't choose a language just because you have interest in it or interest in the media, but it really helps when you have both a relationship element and a communication element, which means you have a relationship with somebody who speaks that language, or you have at least some connection to a group of people that speaks that language that's in your local vicinity, and 2, you have a need to communicate in that language, or you have at least the possibility of naturally using that language in your everyday life. So for my sons, I have chosen Spanish as the language that they are growing up with because 1, they do have a relationship with that language. My sons are half Caucasian and half Mexican. Their grandparents are from Mexico. They have a whole side of their family that speaks Spanish as a native language. My husband speaks Spanish as a native language. So they have a heritage connection with it. They also have, 2, the ability to and the need to communicate in it. My husband speaks to them primarily in Spanish. I try to speak to them in Spanish when I can. We read Spanish books. There's a reason for them to understand it in their life. Spanish shows up in their everyday life. Now this is going to look different for each person depending on where you live and who you have relationships with, but I ask you to put some thought into it, not just simply pick a language off the shelf, but to put some thought into this because you are going to be much more successful in your language if you put thought into your choice. Now, based on where we live, I would have never chosen Spanish as a second language because where we live, nobody speaks Spanish. For my sisters who are just doing foreign language because they're school age, they're not being raised bilingual, but they are studying a foreign language, they're studying Mandarin because Mandarin is commonly spoken where we live. It's very easy to walk into an elevator at the mall and overhear Mandarin conversations. It's easy to run into people anywhere speaking Mandarin. You'll see Chinese characters on signs, on menus, everywhere you go. It's easy to use it. It's easy to practice reading just in the general atmosphere. So Mandarin is a better choice as far as the location where we live. They don't have the heritage connection to Spanish, so it wouldn't be as much of a motivation for them to learn it. So we're doing Spanish for my little boys and Chinese for the big girls. And that's our reason why. The second aspect, after you've decided what language and chosen it carefully, the second big aspect that's going to affect your success or not is how much you invest. And the thing you need to invest the most of is time. I see so many programs advertising, learn a language in 15 minutes a day. And I do not recommend this. I recommend don't try to squeeze it into a little schedule of your homeschool day that here, this is our 15 minutes for Spanish or our 15 minutes for Chinese or whatever. Don't try to put language in a little time slot box because that's not going to work. That's where you're going to get the why aren't my kids able to speak? Why aren't they able to communicate? I would say the best amount of time to put into foreign language study is as much as possible, which that might be somewhat unrealistic. And if you're not a bilingual family and you're not going for total bilingualism, maybe you don't need nearly as much emphasis. But don't try to fit it into a 15-minute box. Try to incorporate it into everything. For family movie night, even if you have to put on the subtitles for everyone to enjoy it, try to watch a foreign film that's in the language that you're studying. Incorporate it everywhere. Have your kids watch YouTube channels or something in that language. Try to listen to the music. Have storybooks. We've got a whole lot of storybooks. And this is an investment of time as well as money. I can't borrow Spanish books from the library here, but I have been slowly and deliberately building a Spanish library so that we have lots of storybooks that I can read, and I make it a priority. We read books in Spanish every single day here. And when he watches a show, which I'm a largely screen-free parent at this stage of life, but when he does watch a show, my rule is pretty much if he's going to watch something, it better be in Spanish because at least it's increasing his exposure to Spanish. So whatever you do, don't try to do it the cheapest and the quickest way possible because that's going to give you cheap results. And just realistically, learning a language is no small endeavor. Being able to speak it clearly and fluently and confidently is no small endeavor. So give it the time that it genuinely needs. Invest time into it and do invest money. There are good resources in different languages. I have other resources which I didn't really bring out to show you for Chinese that also we had to invest money into it. It is worth it. Language skills are amazing. I believe it's worth the investment, but I also believe it takes an investment. And number 3, the last tip I want to leave you with is don't necessarily ignore formal language study. A lot of people who are really big on immersion and just getting in there and speaking a language and communicating and using materials designed for native speakers, that's great. And I think that's really important. We don't do all formal language study. I believe in just using storybooks and using TV shows and just getting out there and talking. We don't really have poetry tea time. We have Chinese conversation time where we just sit around and I ask the girls whatever questions I can think of in Mandarin and try to make them actually just have a natural conversation with me. And we get silly with it and we have fun with it, but it gets them talking and challenging themselves. That is important, but don't feel like because everyone says, oh, you can't learn a language from a textbook. Don't feel like you shouldn't do any textbooks or you shouldn't do any formal grammar study. It might be partially my learning style, but I find formal grammar study very helpful because I'm able to speak Chinese conversationally. I'm able to put sentences together very well. But when I was learning Chinese, very early on, my professor taught me how Chinese sentences work and that they're put together in a different order from English sentences. They go who, when, where, what, instead of who, what, when, where. There's a different order to the information that goes in a Chinese sentence when you're speaking Mandarin. And that was so helpful and so mind-blowing. And now I'm able to put Chinese sentences together and it just comes naturally and it sounds right. I'm at that stage now. But early on, it actually was really helpful to be able to think, okay, what comes first? The who, the when, the where. Where do I put that in the sentence? That structure helped me to get started. Whereas if I had had to totally learn it, it would have probably been slower. And just for me, I think it's helpful. Native speakers study the grammar of their own language. You wouldn't tell your child who's growing up in English not to study English grammar, not to study punctuation or capitalization or all the rules that we use, because even though they're fluent in speaking English, they still need to know the technicalities and the rules of English grammar. So I would say don't neglect the grammar, the capitalization and all that. I mean, did you even know Spanish capitalization is different from English capitalization rules? The rules are different from language to language. This is important to learn if you want to become, very capable in your second language. So I would say don't neglect it. Even though maybe it's not the best or only way to learn from a textbook, I do find textbooks and grammar rules and dictionaries very helpful for really polishing your language skills. I hope that this has been helpful and that it's inspired you. Whether you're trying to raise bilingual children from a young age, or whether you're trying to start a foreign language in high school because it is a requirement for most states or for most colleges when you're graduating your high schooler and you need to get those 2 years of foreign language in and you don't want to waste them. Language skills are amazing for life. If you are studying a foreign language or incorporating a second language in your family, go ahead and tell me in the comments below, what language are you guys learning together? Give this video a thumbs up if you like it, and do subscribe to our channel for more adventurous homeschool content. Bye!